In the gilded ballrooms of 1840s London, one name is whispered with more reverence and curiosity than the Queen's, Lady Seraphina Blackwood. Famed for her beauty and her staggering wealth, she is the Ice Widow, a woman who has refused every duke, baron, and gentleman who has sought her hand. For 2 years she has held society at bay. But what society doesn't know is that the Ice Widow is guarding a terrible secret, a secret buried in ledgers and lies. And that secret is about to be exposed by the one man in England even she should fear, Alistair, the Duke of Hawthorne. He is a man who doesn't woo, he conquers, and he is coming for her. The chandelier at Devonshire House dripped crystals like frozen tears, casting a brilliant, cold light on the assembled ton. And in this glittering ocean, Lady Seraphina Blackwood was the most coveted prize. "You are relentless, Lady Dowding," Seraphina said, her voice a low, smooth melody that concealed the tremor of exhaustion. She smiled, a perfect, practiced curving of the lips that never reached her eyes. Lady Honoria Dowding, a woman built like a disgruntled battleship, tapped her fan against Seraphina's arm. "I am practical, my dear. It has been 2 years. 2 years. A woman of your assets cannot remain unattached. It is simply not done. Look," she gestured discreetly. "Baron Rutherford, a solid man. Good land." Seraphina's gaze flickered to the Baron. He was indeed solid. Solid as a block of wood. "He is very substantial, aunt." "And Lord Percival Croft," Lady Honoria pressed on, oblivious. "Such wit, such fashion." "Such debt," Seraphina countered, allowing a sliver of ice into her tone. Lord Croft was watching her now from across the room, his eyes oily, with an appraisal that made her skin crawl. He saw her not as a woman, but as a vault to be cracked. They all did. Ever since her husband, Lord Marcus Blackwood, had conveniently broken his neck in a drunken steeplechase, Seraphina had become the single most desirable property in England. Marcus had been old, cruel, and neglectful, but he had left her, supposedly, with the vast Blackwood fortune, the London townhouse, and the sprawling country estate, Blackwood Manor. "You joke, Seraphina, but you must choose," Lady Honoria insisted. "A beautiful woman alone is a tragedy. A wealthy woman alone is a target." On that, Seraphina silently agreed. She extricated herself with practiced grace, pleading the heat, and moved toward the terrace. Before she could take 2 steps, Lord Croft intercepted her. "Lady Blackwood," he purred, bowing so low she could smell the macassar oil on his hair. "You are a vision, a diamond in a sea of paste." "Lord Croft, you are too kind. I am merely honest," he said, stepping closer. "This charade of yours is amusing, my lady, but it grows thin. A dove such as yourself needs a protector, a man to guide her." His implication was clear. He fancied himself her master. Seraphina's spine turned to steel. "Guide me, Lord Croft. I fear you mistake me for a lost poodle. I am perfectly capable of navigating my own path. Now, if you will excuse me." She swept past him, ignoring the flush of anger that stained his pale cheeks and the titters from those who had witnessed the exchange. The Ice Widow had struck again. She did not return home to the Mayfair townhouse until well after 2 in the morning. She dismissed her maid, Beatrice, with a weary sigh and locked the door to her bedchamber. But she did not go to bed. Instead, she walked to a hidden panel by the fireplace, pressing a knot in the carved oak. The panel sprang open, revealing not jewels, but a small, heavy iron box. She pulled it out, set it on her desk, and produced a key from a chain around her neck. Inside were not letters, but ledgers. This was the real Seraphina. Not the Ice Widow, not the coveted prize, just Seraphina, the terrified accountant. She lit a candle, dipped her pen in the inkwell, and began to work, her perfect brow furrowed in concentration. The world believed Marcus Blackwood had left her rich. The world was wrong. Marcus had been a degenerate gambler. He had not just spent his fortune, he had mortgaged it. He had borrowed against the land, the house, even the crops. The vast Blackwood fortune was a hollow shell. For 2 years, Seraphina had been engaged in a desperate, secret war. She had sold off her own private jewelry, piece by piece. She had dismissed most of the staff under the guise of modernizing. She had learned crop rotation, argued with creditors, and stalled bailiffs, all while smiling at balls and refusing proposals. She was not refusing suitors because she was grieving. She was refusing them because she was trying to survive. She valued the freedom her widowhood had given her, a freedom from a cruel husband. But she was also hiding a catastrophic secret. If any of these men discovered she was not a prize, but a pauper, they would abandon her. Or worse, one might, like Croft, try to trap her, thinking he could salvage the estate and own her in the process. She reviewed the numbers again. The final largest debt, the one that held the mortgage on Blackwood Manor itself, was held by a shadowy entity known only as the Gresham Syndicate. They had been quiet for a time, but a letter had arrived that morning. It was not a request, it was a summons. The principal holder of the Blackwood debt requests a meeting, our offices, Tuesday next. A chill, far colder than any ballroom, snaked down her spine. The wolves were no longer circling. They were at the door. The name Hawthorne was not spoken in polite society. It was hissed. Alastair, the Duke of Hawthorne, was a ghost story made flesh. His family, once one of the most respected in England, had been spectacularly ruined by his father's catastrophic investments, and, it was whispered, his associations with the very worst sort of men. When the old Duke died, penniless and disgraced, young Alastair had disappeared to the continent. He returned 10 years later, a different man. He was no longer the charming boy people remembered. He was silent, ruthless, and possessed of an uncanny, almost terrifying acumen for finance. He moved not in ballrooms, but in the smoky back rooms of Lloyd's of London and the stark offices of financiers. He did not rebuild his family's fortune. He forged a new one, allegedly by identifying his father's enemies and rivals, acquiring their debts, and crushing them, one by one. He was fabulously wealthy, utterly powerful, and completely alone. He was known, in the hushed tones of the trading floors, as the Wolf of Hawthorne. And now, he was in London. They say he hasn't attended a social event in a decade, Lady Honoria whispered to Seraphina at a music hall, her eyes scanning the crowd. He bought the old Rochester house, but no one has been inside. He is a monster, my dear. A recluse. Seraphina barely heard her. Her mind was on the Gresham Syndicate. Tuesday. Tomorrow. She felt a knot of pure dread in her stomach. A sudden hush fell over the room. It was not a polite silence. It was a cessation of all sound, as if a vacuum had sucked the air from the salon. Seraphina turned. He was standing in the doorway. She knew, instantly, that it was him. The Duke of Hawthorne was tall, dangerously so. He was dressed in immaculate, severe black, a stark column in the sea of colourful silks and velvets. His shoulders were broad, and he held himself with an unyielding stillness. But it was his face that held the room captive. It was a face of harsh planes and sharp angles, as if carved from granite. Dark hair, eyes so deep-set they seemed to be in shadow, and a mouth that looked as if it had never formed a smile. He was not handsome in the classical sense. He was compelling, frightening. He did not scan the room. His gaze moved with deliberate, assessing slowness. It swept past the gawking debutantes, the nervous gentlemen, and the whispering matrons. And then it found Seraphina. And it stopped. It was not the leering gaze of Lord Croft or the bovine appreciation of Baron Rutherford. It was the most unsettling look she had ever received. It was cold, calculating, and heavy. It was the look of a predator identifying its quarry. He did not see her beauty, her dress, or her status. He saw something else, something underneath. Seraphina, the ice widow, who could quell a rogue with a single glance, felt an involuntary shiver trace its way down her spine. She held his gaze, refusing to be the first to look away. It was a silent battle of wills that lasted only 10 seconds, but felt like a lifetime. He gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. Not a greeting, an acknowledgement. Then, as silently as he arrived, he turned and was gone. The room exploded in chatter. Good heavens, it was him. Did you see his eyes? He looked right at Lady Blackwood. Seraphina stood frozen. Her aunt was babbling beside her, but the sound was distant. One thought hammered in her mind, a premonition of pure, cold dread. That look was not one of social curiosity. It was one of business. She clutched her reticule, the crisp edge of the Gresham Syndicate's letter pressing against her palm. She suddenly had a very, very bad feeling about her meeting tomorrow. The Wolf of Hawthorne had come to London, and she felt, with a terrifying certainty, that he had come for her. The offices of the Gresham Syndicate were not in a fashionable part of town. They were in a narrow, imposing building of grey stone near the Thames, where the air smelled of salt, coal, and commerce. Seraphina stepped out of her carriage, dismissing it. She would walk back. She needed to appear confident, not like a woman arriving for an execution. She pulled her veil down, smoothed the front of her modest but elegant grey velvet dress, and walked inside. The outer office was hushed. A clerk with spectacles, a Mr. Thornton, rose immediately. "Lady Blackwood, we have been expecting you." His voice was clipped, professional, but held no warmth. "If you will follow me." He led her not to a comfortable meeting room, but down a corridor to a large, imposing oak door. He knocked once, then opened it, standing aside to let her pass. The room was vast, dominated by a desk the size of a carriage. It was dark, panelled in mahogany, and the only light came from 2 tall windows overlooking the churning grey river. A figure stood at one of the windows, his back to her, hands clasped behind him. "Your Grace," Mr. Thornton said softly. "Lady Blackwood is here." The figure turned, and Seraphina's blood ran cold. It was him, the Duke of Hawthorne. "Thank you, Thornton. You may leave us," Alistair said. His voice was deep, resonant, and utterly devoid of emotion. The door clicked shut, leaving Seraphina alone with the wolf. "Your Grace," she said, her voice admirably steady, though her heart was hammering against her ribs. "I confess I am surprised. I was under the impression I was meeting with the directors of the Gresham Syndicate." "You are?" he replied, moving to stand behind the massive desk. He did not sit. He did not invite her to sit. He loomed. "I am the Gresham Syndicate. It is a private venture of mine." Of course. It all made a sickening sense, the whispers of him acquiring his enemies' debts. He was the unknown, ruthless entity. "I see," she said, forcing herself to move forward, to stand before the desk as an equal, not a supplicant. "Then it is you I must speak to regarding the Blackwood estate." "There is nothing to speak about," Alistair said. He gestured to a stack of papers on his desk. Her papers, her debts. "The terms of the mortgage are explicit. The final payment was due 60 days ago. You have defaulted. The property, Blackwood Manor, and all its holdings Revert to the lender. To me? His words were blades. No preamble, no courtesy. Just the cold, hard fact. Your Grace, Seraphina began, her mind racing. My late husband's affairs were complex. I have spent 2 years restructuring the estate. The farms are productive again. The tenants are secure. I am asking for an extension. 6 months. I can make the estate profitable. Alistair watched her, his dark eyes unblinking. You are an excellent actress, Lady Blackwood. Your performance as the grieving, untouchable widow is the talk of London. This new role, the competent businesswoman, is almost as convincing. This is not a role, Seraphina snapped, the ice in her own demeanour finally cracking to reveal the steel beneath. I have managed that estate single-handedly. I have sold my own assets to cover the wages your syndicate would have seen forfeit. I am not asking for a favour. I am presenting a sound business proposal. A proposal? He gave a short, harsh laugh that held no humour. You have no business, madam. You have a mountain of debt, and I am the mountain. You come here to plead for time, but you have nothing to offer. I offer the estate itself. It is worth more intact than broken up. It is worth more to me as it is, he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous low. I am not a banker, Lady Blackwood. I am a collector. A dark, terrible suspicion began to dawn. A collector? What do you mean? He leaned forward, placing his hands flat on the desk. He was a predator about to strike. Your late husband, Marcus Blackwood. He was not just a fool. He was a thief. He was one of the men who clustered around my father, advised him, encouraged his worst impulses, and then, when the crash came, picked the meat from his bones. Your husband built his fortune on the ruin of my family. Seraphina stared, horrified. I knew nothing of this. I do not care what you knew. Alistair's voice rose, a controlled thunder that shook the room. I spent 10 years hunting every man who sat at that table. Lord Reading, Sir Thomas Fry, and Marcus Blackwood. He was the last. He thought he was safe. He thought his death would protect his legacy. He moved around the desk, stopping a few feet from her. He was so tall, so imposing. He was wrong. I do not care about the land. I do not care about the tenants. I care about justice. And justice, in this case, is foreclosure. I will tear Blackwood Manor down, stone by stone if I have to. I will salt the earth it stood on. The Blackwood name will be erased. Seraphina was trembling, not with fear, but with a white, hot rage. He saw her as an extension of Marcus, a partner in his crimes. You are a monster, she whispered. I am what men like your husband made me, he retorted. You are blind, she said, her voice rising to match his. You see only your own vengeance. You speak of my husband. That man was my jailer. He was a brute and a degenerate, and I suffered his cruelty for 5 years. I have spent the last 2 praying for his soul while fighting to undo the damage he wrought. You think you are seeking justice? You are seeking to punish his victims? He faltered, just for a second, a flicker of uncertainty in those cold eyes. But it vanished. A convenient story. One I am sure you tell your suitors. I tell it to no one, she cried. I have fought alone. And I will not let you destroy the lives of the hundreds of people who depend on that land, all for a vendetta against a dead man. It is already done, Alistair said, his voice flat again. The papers are filed. I am the legal owner. I will be at Blackwood Manor in 3 days to take inventory. I suggest you pack your personal belongings. He turned his back on her, returning to the window. The dismissal was absolute. Seraphina stood there for a long moment, the silence broken only by the ticking of a large clock. The fight had drained out of her, leaving a cold, hollow dread. She had lost. She had fought for 2 years, only to be crushed by a man's decade-long quest for revenge. She turned, her shoulders straight, and walked out of the room. She would not let him see her weep. Serafina did not weep. She did not return to London to pack. Instead, she hired the fastest carriage she could find and flew down the post road to Blackwood Manor in Kent. She arrived not as a defeated mistress, but as a general preparing for a final stand. The moment she reached the manor, she summoned her head groundskeeper, Mr. Hayes, and her estate manager, Mr. Finch. They were good men who had served her father before Marcus had taken over, and who had quietly supported her efforts to save the estate. "Gentlemen," she said, standing in the estate office, her bonnet still on, "we have a crisis. The estate's primary mortgage has been called in. The new owner, the Duke of Hawthorne, arrives in 2 days to seize the property." The 2 men blanched. "Seize?" Finch stammered. "My lady, but the harvest is half in. The winter stores." "He does not care about the harvest," Serafina said, her voice hard. "He intends to break the estate. He intends to evict." "Evict?" Hayes was a man of the land. The word was poison. "He can't. Not the tenants. Not Mrs. Gable with her children. Not old Thomas." "He can. And he will," Serafina said. "He holds a grudge against my late husband. He intends to punish us for his sins." A dark, mutinous energy filled the room. These people had despised Lord Blackwood. They had seen his cruelty to Serafina. They had worked tirelessly with her to undo his damage. "He will not," Finch said, his jaw set. "This is our land, my lady. Your land." "That is where you are wrong, Mr. Finch," Serafina said, a grim light in her eyes. "Legally it is his. He has the papers. We cannot fight him with law." "Then what do we fight him with?" Hayes asked. Serafina looked out the window at the fields, at the small cottages in the distance. "With ourselves." 2 days later, the Duke of Hawthorne's carriage, a severe black coach emblazoned with a wolf's head crest, rolled up the long drive to Blackwood Manor. Alistair stepped out, expecting a locked house, a weeping widow, or perhaps an obsequious staff. He found the entire population of the estate waiting for him. They were gathered on the great lawn in front of the house. Not a mob. They were silent, standing in family groups, farmers, blacksmiths, dairymaids, stable hands, and their children. They held no weapons, no pitchforks. They just stood. And at their head, on the top step of the manor, stood Lady Serafina Blackwood. She was not dressed in black. She wore a simple, defiant dress of deep blue, her hair pulled back, her face pale but resolute. Alistair stopped it. Mr. Thornton, who had arrived with him, nervously shuffled his papers. "What is the meaning of this?" Alistair demanded, his voice carrying in the heavy silence. "These are the holdings you have come to claim, Your Grace," Serafina called out, her voice clear as a bell. "These are the families you intend to make homeless." Alistair's eyes narrowed. This was a theatricality he had not anticipated. "This is between you and me, madam. Do not hide behind your servants." "They are not my servants," she retorted. "They are my people. They are the ones who have worked this land while you sat in London counting your money. They are the ones who paid their rents. Rents I used to pay the interest on your loan, while I sold my own mother's pearls to feed my household. You speak of my late husband's crimes. These people are as innocent as I am. More so." She walked down the steps, moving through the crowd, which parted for her respectfully. She stopped directly in front of him. She was much shorter than he was, yet she seemed to look down on him. "You want to take inventory, Your Grace? Very well. Let us begin." She pointed to a woman holding a baby. "This is Mary Gable. Her value is 2 small children and a husband lost to consumption. She runs the dairy." She pointed to an old man with a cough. "This is Thomas. He has worked the home wood for 50 years. His value is loyalty and a knowledge of the trees that you could never possess." She continued, walking the line, naming family after family, her voice ringing with a cold, righteous fury. Alistair was trapped. He was a man of the city, of finance. He dealt in numbers, in ledgers, in contracts. He had never been confronted by the human cost of his actions. He had come to destroy a concept, the Blackwood legacy. He was now face to face with 100 souls he was about to destroy with it. He could, of course, order them off. He had the law. But the sight of it, this feared, ruthless duke throwing dozens of families onto the road, the scandal would be immense. It would be a stain on his name that not even his wealth could polish away. Seraphina had checkmated him. "You have made your point, Lady Blackwood," he growled, his face a mask of controlled fury. "Have I?" she asked, stepping close to him. "You came here to salt the earth. Here it is. Here are the crops. Here are the people. Do it." She held his gaze, and he saw no fear. He saw only a terrifying, unyielding strength. Let the world see the wolf of Hawthorne devour women and children, or get back in your carriage and leave us in peace. He stared at her, the silence stretching. He hated her in that moment, hated her for complicating his perfect, clean vengeance, hated her for making him see her. "This changes nothing," he said, his voice low and menacing. "The debt remains. The property is mine." "Then run it," she challenged, "if you believe you can. But you will not do it by terror. You will not evict a single soul. I will not be dictated to. You have no choice," she said. "You have the law, Your Grace. I have the people. We shall see which is stronger." Alistair looked from her defiant face to the silent, watching crowd. He had won the legal battle, but he had just lost the war. "Thornton," he snapped, "find me lodging at the local inn. It seems my inspection of the property will take longer than anticipated." He turned on his heel and strode back to his carriage, defeated. Seraphina watched him go, her body trembling with the adrenaline of the confrontation. She had won the first battle, but the wolf was now at her door. The inn was unacceptable. Alistair, accustomed to the severe, silent luxury of his London house, found the cheerful, noisy country inn intolerable. He requisitioned a small, unused dower house on the edge of the estate, a mile from the manor, and had his things moved there. He was, in effect, a king in exile, owning everything and controlling nothing. He sent for the estate books. Seraphina delivered them herself, carrying the heavy ledgers into the dusty drawing room of the dower house. "I will need to review these with you," she stated. It was not a request. And so began the strangest truce in English history. Every morning, Seraphina would walk from the manor, and every day they would sit across a long table from each other, the ledgers open between them, a silent battleground. At first he was ruthless. He was a master of numbers, and he tore into her accounting with a savage precision, looking for fraud, for incompetence, for any sign that she was the partner in crime he'd believed her to be. "You sold the South Pasture lease for half its worth," he accused on the first day. "I sold it to Mr. Hayes," she countered calmly, on the condition that he hire 3 of the families made homeless by the mill fire. The other offer was higher, but it would have used the land for sheep, displacing those families permanently. "I chose people over profit," he grunted, making a note. "A poor business decision." "A necessary human one," she replied. On the second day, he was quieter. He was no longer just looking at the numbers. He was seeing the story they told. He saw the massive, hemorrhaging expenditures from Marcus Blackwood. He saw the gambling debts, the loans for frivolous building projects, the sums paid to silence mistresses. And then, 2 years ago, that flow of red ink stopped. It was replaced by Serafina's neat, precise hand. He saw the sale of the London stables, the auction of the art collection, which he'd assumed was still in the house, the dismissal of the French chef, the under-butlers, the second footman. He saw line items for seed, for new ploughs, for roof repairs on tenant cottages. He was looking at a 2-year, desperate, brilliant campaign of conservation. She hadn't been living as a wealthy widow. She'd been living as a besieged quartermaster, rationing every penny to keep the fortress from falling. "You did this?" he asked, his voice rough, holding up a ledger showing the renegotiated grain contracts. "You negotiated with the Corn Exchange yourself?" "Mr. Finch is a good manager, but he is not a fighter," Serafina said simply, not looking up. "They were used to bullying him. They were not used to me." He fell silent. He was not looking at an accomplice. He was looking at an adversary of equal, if not greater, skill than himself. A general. On the 3rd day, the air had changed. The hostility was gone, replaced by a tense, grudging respect. He was no longer interrogating. He was learning. That afternoon, while searching for a misfiled land deed, Alistair's hand brushed against a different book, tucked away on a low shelf, covered in dust. It was not a ledger. It was a private journal, bound in dark green leather, with the initials MB. He knew he shouldn't. It was a violation. He looked at Serafina, who was absorbed in a map of the drainage fields. He pulled the book out and opened it. It was Marcus Blackwood's journal. He read the first page, and the second, and he felt a cold sickness rise in his throat. The man who emerged from the ink was not just the thief Alistair had hunted. He was a monster. He wrote of his contempt for his young wife. He mocked her intelligence. He detailed his affairs with a casual, preening cruelty. He described arguments, her defiance, and his methods of correcting her. "The little bird thought she could sing," one entry read. "I have clipped her wings. She will not speak against me again." Alistair looked up, his blood like ice. He looked at Serafina, really looked at her. He saw the high-necked dress she always wore. He saw the way she unconsciously rubbed her left wrist when she was stressed. He remembered her cry in his office. "He was my jailer." He had dismissed it as theatre. Now, the horrific, brutal truth was laid bare in her abuser's own hand. He slammed the journal shut. The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet room. Serafina jumped, her head snapping up. "What is it?" Alistair stared at her, his face ashen. The woman he had hunted for a decade, the woman he had terrorized, bullied, and tried to ruin, was not his enemy. She was the final and most brutalized victim of the man he despised. His entire quest for vengeance, the thing that had defined his entire adult life, crumbled to dust in that single, horrifying moment. "Your Grace?" Serafina asked, rising, a new fear in her eyes. "Alistair? What is wrong?" It was the first time she had used his name. He couldn't speak. He pushed the journal across the table toward her. I apologize. I should not have. I did not know." Serafina saw the book. Her face went blank, all emotion draining from it. She looked at the book, then at him, and she understood. He had read it. He knew. She didn't cry, she didn't rage. She simply sat down, the strength leaving her legs, and covered her face with her hands. The Ice Widow, finally, catastrophically, melted. Alistair stood frozen, every instinct in him screaming. He had built his life on a foundation of rage, and that foundation was now gone, leaving only a terrible, hollow shame. The truce was broken, replaced by a fragile, terrifying silence. Seraphina did not return to the dower house the next day. Alistair, left alone with the ledgers and his own guilt, found himself unable to work. He walked the grounds, seeing them now not as a prize to be seized, but as a sanctuary she had built. He saw the repaired fences, the healthy livestock, the tidy cottages. He saw the work. He had come to tear down a dead man's legacy, and he had almost destroyed a living woman's masterpiece. On the third day, his man, Thornton, arrived from London in a lather, his carriage wheels muddy. "Your Grace, a complication?" Thornton said, rushing into the dower house. "Lord Percival Croft." Alistair looked up, his mind still on Seraphina. "Who?" "One of Lady Blackwood's suitors, a degenerate. He's bought the Cotter's note." Alistair frowned. "The Cotter's note? The gambling debt? I thought that was worthless." "It seems Blackwood used a cottage deed as collateral, a cottage currently occupied by one of the tenant families. Croft has filed a writ of seizure. He's not after the cottage, Your Grace. He's after the widow." Alistair's blood, which had been sluggish with shame, began to boil with a new, cold fury. "He means to use it as leverage, to force her hand." "He arrives today," Thornton said. "He believes you are here to foreclose, and he sees himself as her rescuer. For a price, of course." "Where is he?" Alistair's voice was quiet, dangerously quiet. "He was seen at the Red Lion Inn, Your Grace, boasting of his plans." "Get back in your carriage, Thornton. We are going to the Red Lion." Lord Percival Croft was holding court in the inn's private parlour, a brandy in his hand, regaling two local squires with his cleverness. "The Ice Widow, gentlemen. She'll melt when she sees she's cornered. The wolf wants to devour her. But I will offer her salvation. She'll be Mrs. Croft by Christmas, mark my words." "I think not." The voice came from the doorway. Lord Croft turned, his smirk freezing on his face. The Duke of Hawthorne filled the doorway, his massive frame radiating a menace that sucked the air from the room. Mr. Thornton stood just behind him, holding a leather satchel. "Your Grace!" Croft sputtered, scrambling to his feet. What a surprise. I was just discussing—" "You were discussing Lady Blackwood," Alistair said, advancing into the room. The two squires, sensing danger, vanished out a side door. "Alistair," Croft said, attempting a familiar, fawning tone. "We need not be at odds. You want the land, I want the lady. We can both get what we desire." Alistair stopped, looming over the smaller man. "You will not speak her name. You will not go near her house, and you will not set foot on her land." "Her land?" Croft laughed, a high, nervous sound. "It's your land, Your Grace, as I understand it, or soon to be. I am merely collecting a small debt." He waved the writ. "Mr. Thornton," Alistair said, never taking his eyes off Croft. Thornton stepped forward and opened the satchel. He produced a bank draft. "The Cotter's note. I believe this is the amount you paid for it." He produced a second draft. "And this is for your travel, your inconvenience, and your silence. You will sign the note over to the Duke. Now." Croft's eyes widened at the sum. It was double what he'd paid, but his ego was stung. "And if I refuse, I have a legal claim." Alistair moved so fast Croft didn't have time to flinch. He seized the front of Croft's jacket, lifting him partially off the floor. "If you refuse," Alistair whispered, his voice a rasp of pure violence, "I will take that piece of paper, and I will personally, financially, annihilate you. I will discover every debt you have, every ill-advised wager. I will buy them. I will call them in. You will not be married by Christmas, my lord. You will be in a debtor's prison. and I will own the very coat on your back. Do you understand me?" Croft, his face a mottled white, could only nod, his eyes wide with terror. "Good." Alistair dropped him. Croft scrambled to the table, snatched a pen, and signed the note over. Thornton handed him the drafts. "Leave Kent," Alistair commanded, "and if I ever hear of you mentioning Lady Blackwood's name again, I will find you." Lord Percival Croft, clutching his money, fled the room, and, within the hour, the county. Alistair stood in the silent parlour, the signed note in his hand. He had not done it for vengeance. He had not done it for business. He had done it for her. The realization struck him with the force of a physical blow. He returned to the dower house, found a candle, and burned the cottar's note and the original mortgage until they were nothing but grey ash. He found her in the old rose garden. It was a place of tragic neglect, a tangled graveyard of thorns and weeds that Marcus had never bothered with, and Seraphina had never had the heart or time to restore. The air was thick with the damp or sweet smell of decay. She was standing by a crumbling stone bench, a pair of rusty pruning shears in her gloved hand, listlessly snipping at a dead, thorny branch. She looked small, lost amidst the ruin. He heard his footsteps on the gravel path, the crunch of his boots sounding like a profanity in the silence. She tensed, her shoulders going rigid, but she did not turn around. "Have you come to serve the final papers, Your Grace?" she asked, her voice hollow, stripped of all its previous fire. "If you are here to evict me, I must confess, I find I am too tired to fight you today." He stopped several feet away, a chasm of broken stone and dead roses between them. The sight of her, so utterly defeated, struck him with a physical pain. This was the woman who had faced down an entire village of tenants, who had battled him in his own office, who had managed a collapsing estate with nothing but wit and steel. He had done this. He had broken her. "No," he said, his voice rough. "I am not here to evict you." She gave a short, bitter laugh that caught in her throat. "Then what? To take inventory of the furniture? To decide which of my personal items you will allow me to keep?" I met Lord Percival Croft at the inn," Alistair said, choosing to start on the one piece of ground, business, they now shared. This, at last, made her turn. Her face was pale, her eyes shadowed with exhaustion and suspicion. "And did you and he have a pleasant negotiation? Did you compare notes on the Blackwood spoils? He, the woman, you, the land, a tidy division." The venom in her words was the last flickering ember of her fight. He welcomed it. It was better than the emptiness. "I bought the debt he held," Alistair said flatly, closing the distance between them. "The cottar's note. He is gone. I have seen to it that he will not return to Kent, and he will not trouble you or your tenants ever again." She stared at him, her mind clearly struggling to process this. The shears hung limply in her hand. "You bought it? But why? It was worthless, a gambler's chit. Why would you, unless as leverage? That's it. You bought my tenant's security to hold it over me. Another weapon in your arsenal." "No," he said, and the word was a plea. "I did it, because I was wrong." He was standing in front of her now, so close he could see the fine tremor in her hands. "I was wrong about everything," he continued, the words coming in a torrent, as if a dam had broken inside him. "My entire life, Seraphina, my entire adult life, has been a single burning pursuit. My father was a weak man, not an evil one. He trusted men like your husband, and they devoured him. They picked his bones clean and laughed while my family's name was dragged through the mud. He gestured, not at her, but at the world. I vowed I would be the opposite. I would be strong. I would be iron. I would be unbending. I would become a wolf, as they called me, a predator who hunted predators. I built my fortune to tear them down, and Marcus Blackwood was the last, the keystone of my vengeance. He looked at her, his dark eyes filled with a profound, aching guilt that shook her to her core. I came here to destroy the last remnant of his legacy. I saw you as an extension of him, his wife, his partner, his prize. I thought your Ice Widow act was a charade to protect his stolen fortune. I was a fool, he whispered, his voice cracking. A blind, arrogant fool. I tore through your life, blinded by a ghost. I read your ledgers. I saw the fight. I saw the sales, the rationing. I saw the work. And then... He couldn't say it. He couldn't voice the shame of having read that journal. I saw the truth. I was not hunting a man's partner. I was terrorizing his final, most brutalized victim. And in my rage to punish a dead man, I became him. I used his same tools, fear and power and intimidation. I have spent the last 3 days realizing that the monster I was hunting was myself. Serafina was silent, her lips parted, tears welling and spilling, tracking clean paths through the dust on her cheeks. He reached into the deep pocket of his greatcoat. He pulled out a sheaf of papers. These are the contracts, the Cotter's note, the original mortgage on Blackwood Manor. He held them out. They were singed at the edges, the ink smeared. And these, he said, reaching into his other pocket and pulling out a small, heavy tin box. He opened it. It was full of grey ash and charred fragments. I burned them, all of them, he said. The debt is gone. The syndicate's claim is void. It is over. The estate is yours, Serafina. Free, clear, no mortgage, no note, no strings. It is yours. She gasped, a choked, sobbing sound, her hand flying to her mouth. You burned them. But that was your claim, your leverage, your entire fortune, your revenge. It's gone. It was a prison, he said, his voice raw. It has kept me in a cage of my own making for a decade. You have been in one for just as long. It is time. It is time we were both free. She stared at the ashes, at the voided papers, and then at his face, searching for the trick, the angle, the trap. She found nothing. She saw no triumph, no calculation. She saw only a vast, hollowed-out emptiness and a fragile, terrifying hope. I don't understand, she whispered, shaking her head. I don't know what to say. What do you want? No one does this for nothing. It was the question that hung between them, heavy as the damp air. He had given her everything. He had disarmed himself, financially and legally. He had no more power over her. That is a fair question, he said softly. He looked at her, this impossible woman, this general, this survivor. He saw the steel that had held an estate together. He saw the fire that had faced him down. And he saw the vulnerable, wounded woman she had hidden from the entire world. The realization of his feelings for her, which had been a quiet dread in the dower house, now struck him as an absolute, undeniable truth. He loved her. I am asking, he said, his voice thick, for a new proposal, not mine, ours. A proposal? She whispered, and her hand tightened on the shears, her body recoiling. A business proposal, he said quickly, seeing her fear. The estate is free, but it is not rich. You know this. It is starved. It needs capital to thrive. It needs new seed, new livestock, repairs to the main house. And I find I am a man with a great deal of capital. And suddenly, no purpose. He took a careful step closer, not threatening, but earnest. Your mind for the land, Serafina. Your heart for the people. My efficiency to run the numbers. My capital to make it grow. A partnership, 50-50. We build it back, together. Her eyes, which had been soft with tears, hardened to polished stone. A partnership. She spat the word. I see. And what are your terms, Duke? Another contract? My name on a new ledger? My hand in marriage to seal the deal? A quiet transfer of power from one master to another. She stepped back, raising the pruning shears slightly, not as a weapon, but as a barrier. I have lived in a cage, Your Grace. It was opulent, it was gilded. Marcus bought me, and he owned me. Lord Croft tried to buy me. My aunt tries to sell me. And now you burn my debts, and then offer me a new one, wrapped in the pretty language of partnership. I will not be bartered for. I will not be owned. Not even for my own freedom. This was the moment. He saw her terror was real. She was not testing him. She was telling him. She saw him as just another man who wanted to possess her. His power, his title, his very presence were a threat. He had to disarm himself completely, in a way that paper and ash never could. His entire life, Alistair had stood tall. He had loomed. He had used his height and his power as a shield and a sword. He knew, in that instant, what he had to do. It was the only act of surrender that would mean anything. And Alistair, the Duke of Hawthorne, the Wolf of London, the most feared and ruthless man in England, did something no one had ever seen him do. He slowly, deliberately, went down on one knee. He did not kneel in the mud as a supplicant. He knelt on the hard gravel path as an equal, lowering himself, surrendering his physical dominance, his ducal pride. He didn't hold a ring. He didn't offer riches. He simply looked up at her, his pride, his rage, and his entire past laid bare and broken at her feet. I am not offering you a cage, Serafina, he said, his voice shaking with the force of his emotion. I swear to you, on my family's name, I am asking to stand guard outside it, until you are ready to walk free, or to lock it yourself, as you wish. He met her stunned, tear-filled gaze. I am not offering you a partnership. I am begging for one. I am not asking for your hand. I am asking for your forgiveness. I am asking for the privilege of your company. I am asking you to teach me. I know how to destroy. I know how to conquer. I do not know how to build. Teach me. He was the Wolf of Hawthorne, and he was kneeling, not in defeat, but in true, absolute, and terrifying surrender. The terms, Lady Blackwood, he finished, his voice raw, are whatever you decide them to be. I am at your service. Serafina looked at the man at her feet, the man who had come to ruin her, and had, instead, saved her. The man who had terrorized her and was now offering her fealty. She saw the scars in his soul, as deep and as real as the ones she hid on her skin. She saw the truth. The Ice Widow, finally, catastrophically, let go. The shears clattered from her numb hand onto the stone. She reached out, her hand trembling. And for the first time in her life, she reached for a man not in defense, not in duty, but in choice. Get up, Alistair, she whispered, her voice breaking. You are kneeling on thorns. He looked at her outstretched hand, as if it were a lifeline. He took it. Her grip was firm. His was steady. It was not a lover's touch. Not yet. It was the clasp of two soldiers who had just agreed to a truce. He rose, slowly, but he did not let go of her hand. Serafina, he said, her name a question, a prayer. She took a shaky breath, looking not at him, but at the tangled, ruined garden around them. You're right. The estate is starved, and this garden, it is a disaster. She looked back at him, a new, fragile light in her eyes. If we are to be partners, we should start here. He nodded, his throat too tight to speak. Get up, Alistair, she said again, her voice stronger now, pulling him to his feet. He stood before her, and for the first time, they were just a man and a woman, the ashes of their past at their feet, and a world to rebuild before them. We have work to do. The whispers in London society did not stop, but they changed. They said the fearsome Duke of Hawthorne had been tamed by the Ice Widow. But those who knew, the tenants of Blackwood Manor, knew the truth. The wolf hadn't been tamed. He had been healed, and the Ice Widow hadn't melted. She had found a fire to match her own. Their partnership rebuilt Blackwood Manor into the most prosperous estate in Kent. Their quiet marriage, held a year later in the restored Rose Garden, scandalized the ton, but was the talk of the county. It was said that the Duke of Hawthorne, a man who never smiled, was rarely seen without his wife by his side, and that the look in his eyes was no longer feared. It was, instead, one of profound and lasting adoration. Thank you for listening to this story of resilience, hidden truths, and the power of forgiveness. So many of us wear armor to protect ourselves, just like Seraphina. But true strength is daring to show the person underneath. If this story moved you, please show your support by hitting that like button. It truly helps our channel grow. And for more stories of drama, love, and life-changing twists, be sure to click subscribe and ring that notification bell so you never miss a new video. We'd also love to hear your thoughts. What was your favorite part of Seraphina and Alistair's story? Leave a comment below, and we'll see you in the next one.